Hi everyone and welcome to another really unprofessional energy update. And I'm really sorry that this is all I can do in the present moment under the present circumstances. But maybe even this is at least a little bit helpful for some people, and it might just give them another perspective or maybe a tool to try their very best to understand what's going on, at least from a karmic perspective in the world, in their lives, and perhaps what the divine intelligence has in mind, because that kind of gives all of us a better position, so to speak, to navigate these energies regardless in which direction they're going. And with that being said, perhaps this is one of the weeks where things are finally getting better, things are finally starting to take a right turn, if this makes sense. But how these energies are playing out collectively and individually might be totally different this week. Because collectively, I can't really say that this is a massive improvement. It is absolutely true that the chaos is quieting down a little bit, but not really from a communication and informational perspective. That is still on full blast, that is still ongoing. So today we have the Magician clarified by the Wheel of Fortune and the Nine of Pentacles. And collectively that means, the Magician, information, investigation, research, data. Also digging up the very recent past. And the Wheel of Fortune collectively represents the greater truth, it represents justice. And Nine of Pentacles basically represents independence and well-being, collectively speaking. So if we add this together, it's pretty straightforward that this week is going to be all about what really happened with the COVID situation, where it came from, how it started, and perhaps most importantly, who is responsible for all of this, internationally speaking, of course, so not an individual, not a person, but rather maybe a country or an administrative entity, if that makes sense. And also what is different, this isn't just the typical investigation and research into how and what happened, but this also has a legal side to it where perhaps for the very, very first time they're speaking about that someone actually in a very palpable way has to answer for this. So that may mean penalties, that may mean compensation or something which has to do in a international court of justice. And even though it's not gonna happen now, this is where the discussions and maybe the negotiations are going to speak about the subject clearly, that someone will have to answer and fix this. And of course, who that entity, so to speak, maybe a country or I'm not even sure. So basically about who is responsible for, starting it, and ultimately that entity or whoever that is has to somehow make more significant efforts to fix it. Next we have the Six of Wands clarified by the Justice reversed and the Emperor. This is basically the same thing. The Six of Wands is the card of triumph and victory, where the Justice is very without even a shadow of doubt about the law, court of justice, equality, fairness, so legal discussions. But this also has a different nuance to it, where, the Six of Wands can also represent a new political, military alliance or reconfiguration, where, two parties, two sides who oppose each other, not necessarily as in a war or our conflict, but maybe their interests just oppose each other very clearly at this time, is gonna become that much more obvious. And perhaps very important leaders, world leaders, are also going to be speaking about this or taking all of this about the new military reconfiguration and alliance on the world stage. So the information is going to be that much clearer to all of us. And finally, we have the Ace of Wands clarified by the Eight of Wands and the Hangman reverse. This is, the Eight of Wands is also symbolic to legislation, to rules, to regulations, especially around international law, Eight of Wands Sagittarius, and also about travel and the legal side of long distance travel, basically. So we might see a change of rules, regulations, legislations, maybe an update. Maybe some rules are gonna become stricter, tighter. And naturally the Hangman reversed, well, that means that it's really gonna agitate people. So there is gonna be a lot of opposition, which also means new protests, new ways of people expressing their dissatisfaction, which on the other hand might represent blockages, the sabotage of certain services. So the chaos continues, just that maybe this week it's going to fold out much more in media, on the internet, communication wise, in a court of justice, of course, so not as much physically, but the planets are still in their extremely volatile positions, the Saturn, Uranus, Mars T-square, with Venus being in it, then the Sun opposing Pluto, etc. So that doesn't mean that the danger of physical expressions of this, for example, a scene of violence, an act of desperation, an explosion which might just be an accident, strange weather phenomenon, and the calamities which have to do with the elements, so either water, fire, earth, landslide, for example, or very strong wind. Now this is still an ongoing theme, just that it's starting not to be as physical as it was until this present moment. And the bottom clarifying cards, the Ten of Swords reversed and the Five of Coins reversed, does represent effort, action that people, communities, countries, etc. take to recover from their losses that they suffered until this present moment, because there were a lot of disturbances, calamities like fires, explosions, accidents. Even in my city, which is usually so very quiet, nothing ever happens here, a big factory just exploded without any warning, and it could have killed basically all of us in the city. So it is that side of things, the physical expression side, which might get a little bit quieter, and that gives everyone a chance to recover, recuperate, humanitarian efforts to help those who were victims, all of this regeneration side. And this also represents that there are going to be a lot of beautiful, compassionate, humanitarian gestures out there. So we will finally see a totally different spectrum of everything that has been going on lately. Now, as I said earlier, individually, personally speaking, this might be a totally different page, a totally different side of this energy, because finally things are starting to get a little bit better. Opportunities are on their way. Everything that has set us back, everything that blocked us, stagnated us, or really, really troubled us, consumed us from within. It really depends on where, these squares stuck us individually. For some people it might have been their finances, their career, their work. For others, emotionally, their families, their psychological and emotional well-being. For others, it might have been just a very tough, strong, vengeful, spiritual dark night of the soul. So it really depends on our personal situation, because the Magician is definitely Mercury. Mercury has been almost struggling in its home sign of Gemini for the past 2 months, which is so unusual for Mercury, because Mercury really moves very quickly. It whizzes through any sign, even its ruling signs. And not just that it was trapped in here when it was retrograde, it also was squared by Neptune, which was really, really bad for Mercury. So that square to Neptune 3 times also, so not just 1 square and bye bye, it was 3 times. That kind of really set us back and forth, 2 steps forward, 5 steps back. One day we knew our truth, the next day it was all gone. We were immediately put back to the drawing board, so it was a really confusing period from every single perspective. So as finally Mercury gets into a better position, the Magician with the Wheel of Fortune and the Nine of Pentacles does represent that life, destiny, fate. The Wheel of Fortune is putting us, regardless of what our situations are and how they played out, this is where we're invited to be in a position of power, or better said, a much more influential position where our thoughts, the control we have over our emotions, our frequency, is going to be making all the difference of how we exit the stagnation and finally start working on what is the most important for all of us regarding our own distinctive situations. Because the Nine of Pentacles, well, it represents our independence, our material well-being, but the source of that well-being is different for all of us. For some people, this independence and well-being has so much to do with their psychological state. For others, the configuration of their emotions. For others, more spiritually. For others, strictly materially, because they might be absolutely fine in any other way. So this is what we're invited to resume work with, to, get into the position that where we need to be in life, to embrace the future and also the present. And it's not just our thoughts and our inner power, the Magician, our own alchemy that becomes stronger and gives us a much greater influence, even though, we might not be king of our castles already, because, things are still much aligned to going with the flow, adapting to whatever comes our way and whatever we have in our lives. So we still have to adapt, we still have to make compromises, we cannot fixate on something, but we are not totally helpless. If we are in a boat and the water is the flow and it's drifting us in a certain direction, well, we still have either a sail, a motor, or whatever to at least influence the way we are being carried by the flow. So that we can adjust the speed, we can adjust even the direction, and of course what we want to make out of this experience. And this ultimately means that the karmic forces and the divine power is going to be much more reactive to our will, our intention, what we try to accomplish. So what we urgently need to have in our lives, regardless of what that is, we might be able to manifest it quite quickly and easily in this period. Now next we have the Six of Wands, the Justice reverse, and the Emperor. And this also delivers a similar message because, ever since the beginning of this year, a lot of us had to make, or some of us still have that pending in our lives, very important decisions, choices, to express preferences of what we want to have in our lives, regarding our futures. And of course, this is where things are different for everyone. For some, it's much more career-oriented, professional, money, house. For others, relationships. For other people, their passions, their hobbies. For others, still, it might be something pending from the past. Something that just doesn't release them from its grip. And this is where we have one of those weeks where the karmic energies are very, very intense. Jupiter in Pisces, Neptune in Pisces. And Jupiter speaks with Mercury in Cancer, which can represent the energy of karmic release, karmic healing, karmic justice, and of course karmic help if someone in your life might be indebted to you in a very karmic way. This is one of those moments when basically karma pulls the soul. So it doesn't matter what that person has in mind or doesn't. Fate just pulls them through their souls in a connection, coincidence or communication, or they dream about you and they contact you, etc. of how this plays out. This is where fate just connects you in order to enable this karmic debt to be repaid. So for a lot of people, this is going to be one of those weeks where you triumph with something, where you achieve some kind of progress, success, the Nine of Wands. And also this comes in a way where it has to give you a sense of justice, that divine justice, the justice reversed, is actually playing out in your life. And even though earthly justice and earthly fairness, equality, etc. might be flawed, it might fail at times, at least divine justice is there, and it can, even if when sometimes it's a little bit late, it can still resolve the problem, solve the situation like earthly justice could never ever do it. So this also gives back a sense of trust, a sense of having control over your life, a sense that regardless what anyone would ever do to you, even if earthly justice could never make that right, divine justice will not fail you. Sometimes we have to wait for years, sometimes for 10 of years, but there will always come a moment when we will see justice playing out, and that gives us a sense of greater trust in the equilibrium and fairness of the invisible forces of the universe. And also for some people, this can play out as someone who owes you something finally giving it to you, regardless if they want or not. Sometimes, regardless if they can or not, they will just have to find a way to help you out, if this is like some kind of karmic indebtment. Now next we have the Ace of Wands clarified by the Eight of Wands and the Hangman reversed. This is also a really, really good combination, because it means that especially for those people who had a lot of stagnation in their lives, and not just this year, for some people it goes back even to 2020, even 2019, where it is perhaps a specific area of life which has been, under a block of ice. Nothing that you might have done, as in taking action, choice, decision, spiritually, psychologically, physically, in any way, shape or form, didn't change things as profoundly as you needed it. So for those people who have been stagnating with anything, this might be a week where action comes into place, something changes. This Ace of Wands can represent, either a communication, a confrontation where you express your sovereign will, and that will change a lot of things. It can also represent an opportunity coming into your life. It can also represent a sudden, unexpected coincidence which just opens a new door, something very unexpected and, not anticipated to play out in this way, shape or form. But, when the door opens, you will immediately know that, that is the saving grace, and you'll just run through it. And for others still, it can represent a karmic opportunity that may have been offered to you in the recent past, a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago maybe, and you missed out on it, or you weren't ready at that time, so you had to either shut your eyes or give up on it. And whatever that opportunity was, it returns in your life in a new form, and it will definitely feel like a saving grace. It will just open a door to something that you've always wanted to live or experience. It will definitely start a new chapter in your life, which will be a little bit parallel with the current chapter, because I do see that not everything is closed, not everything is finished in the old chapter, but you're already so very close to the finish. That's why the new, the next can open up simultaneously, especially that the closing part, what you need to escape from right now, is so very late. Even from a karmic perspective, it should have been closed by now, but it wasn't. It didn't come together, or something blocked it. Maybe it was an inner force, maybe it was just the COVID situation blocking even certain fated events for some people. But anyway, this represents a powerful change, a powerful opportunity, an option. Even if it's like a compromise, it can still open the doors for you to move forward. The Eight of Wands, well, it can represent travel, it can represent leaving the place where you are now, it can represent offers coming in from another country, abroad, from the internet, for example. It can also represent connection, friends, family that you might have in another place, in another country. And the Hangman reversed, well, reverse it. It is the moment when the stagnation, feeling trapped, when we get into our cocoon, it may be nice, comfortable, protective. That is where we look our wounds. But if we stay in that place for a very long time, it will already start to suffocate us and eat us up. We just digest ourselves. So the cocoon that we have entered into has to finally break free. And as a resolution, we have the Six of Cups and the Three of Cups. That is also a wonderful energy, because the Six of Cups can represent that all of us have a very special pattern which has always been part of our lives, of how we individually, specifically, get out of big turmoils. And the way this manifests is pretty much always the same at every major cycle in our lives. So for some people this can represent rock bottom, the end of hope, the end of everything, giving up, surrendering totally, and then immediately just something just comes out of the blue and gives them a solution or something new to work on. For others, it can be quite the opposite, where you all of a sudden feel so hopeful, you feel full of emotional energy, and then immediately something truly wonderful happens. So for some people, you kind of feel the serendipity before it happens, and for others still, you might not even expect it. You might have even found some alternative solution to your problems, and exactly when you think you no longer need a big divine intervention, it comes knocking on your door, and it gives you a plan B or an alternative solution, which is 10 million times better than the one you thought about. So it will be a very joyful moment. And also, whatever happens this week, a part of it at least, is gonna be so beautiful, wonderful, magical, as in so very positive, that it might stay as a memory. It might create a moment of nostalgia, as in a moment might become immortal, which you'll remember for a lot of years. Something wonderful might happen, which will be an active part of your treasured memories. And the Three of Cups, is also a really wonderful sign, because it means celebration, connection, a good news, sharing beautiful moments with either your best friends, your family, your loved ones. So something wonderful might happen to you, and you might also share it with other people, or maybe quite the opposite. Something really wonderful happens to someone who you deeply love, and they share it with you, and that might also be one of your solutions. Or it might simply be something which will stay with you as a nostalgic moment for a long time now. For example, a wedding invitation unexpectedly, where someone who you love all of a sudden decides to get married, or someone announces that they are expecting a baby. Something wonderful happens to someone who you love, so it's really, really good. And also, to clarify this, we have the Ten of Swords reversed and the Five of Pentacles reversed. Both of them are a really positive confirmation that on one hand the Ten of Swords reversed Well, in upright position, the Ten of Swords means the end of the cycle. The end might be a little bit uncomfortable, painful, because it means surrender. It means that no matter what you do, you cannot solve it, fix it. You just have to let it go. You just have to let it die. You just have to basically alchemize it into a memory, into an experience. You no longer have power over it. But when it's reversed, it is all of this, of course, but perhaps the situation can still be saved in the sense that it won't be alchemized to a loss, to a surrender, to a helpless situation, but rather quite the opposite. Something will happen which will offer a much more positive resolution. It is still a closing of a cycle, a termination, but perhaps something really positive can be still built on the ruins, on the rubble, to whatever has been demolished in your life. And the Five of Coins is equally as positive because it means getting out of poverty, getting out of illness, any kind of material struggle or even psychological struggle, feeling left out, feeling abandoned, feeling like you're struggling in one area of your life. So the crisis, the moment of vulnerability and feeling like you're a victim of circumstances, fate, another person, or maybe your own doing, that feeling of self-victimization and victimhood is finally coming to an end. So this can be a week with massive opportunities for us individually. Now, this is what the cards have to say. Thank you so much for listening. I do hope that this was inspirational at least. I wish everyone a wonderful and fantastic and magical week. Until next time, bye for now.